From the outside, my life looked settled, even comfortable. A quiet house, a routine, a husband who provides, who assumes that silence means stability. What it actually means is absence. I didn't go to the gym looking for attention. I went because the days felt too long, and my body felt like it was disappearing from my own awareness. I needed structure. I needed to feel present in myself again. That's where I noticed Daniel. He didn't approach me. He didn't flirt. He was just there. Tall, solid, unmistakably confident in the way he moved through space. He never stared, but he noticed. And that, more than anything, is what unsettled me. I want to be clear. Nothing happened. But something almost did. And the danger wasn't in what he did or said. It was in what I allowed myself to feel. The way my thoughts began to drift. The way I justified staying a few minutes longer. The way silence between us started to feel intimate. This is not a story about betrayal. It's about the moment before it. The space where longing lives. The point where restraint becomes a daily, conscious choice. I remember the first time I realized how much attention, or maybe just acknowledgement, could unsettle me. It wasn't dramatic. I wasn't even looking for him. I was midway through my set, the clanging of weights echoing around the gym, when I caught his gaze from across the room. Daniel was leaning against a machine, towel around his neck, casually scrolling his phone. And yet, the way he looked up, and our eyes met, it felt deliberate. Not in a predatory way, but in a way that made me acutely aware of myself, of my body, of the hollowness I hadn't admitted to in years. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just gym etiquette, that he was probably scanning the room, like everyone else. But then he smiled, subtle, almost imperceptible, and my heart stuttered. I could feel a heat creeping into my chest, a shiver I quickly tried to ignore. I finished my set with deliberate slowness, telling myself it was normal to notice someone. But each repetition felt heavier, charged. Over the next few weeks, our interactions were brief, polite. He held the door for me, offered a nod, sometimes a casual comment about a machine or a set. But it was never just mechanical. There was an undercurrent, a tension in the silence after he spoke. The way he would linger for a second longer than necessary, adjusting his stance as if aware of my presence in a more personal way than he should be. I found myself imagining scenarios that never happened, rehearsing conversations in my head where he leaned closer, smiled more openly, asked me out. I hated myself for it. I hated that I craved it, even a fraction of it. Every time I left the gym, I felt guilty before I even stepped into my car. Not because anything happened, but because my mind had already wandered far, too far. I was walking a line I didn't even want to admit existed. The thrill wasn't about him, exactly. It was about being seen, about feeling noticed, desired, alive in a way my marriage no longer allowed. And yet, every rational part of me screamed to stop. My pulse slowed only when I reminded myself who I was, where I belonged. But the pull remained. It was subtle, persistent, and I was powerless to ignore it entirely. There was one evening that changed everything, or at least changed how I saw myself. I'd stayed late at the gym, longer than usual, telling myself it was for cardio, for my health. In reality, I was hoping to catch him there when it was quieter, to feel that silent electricity without the distraction of other people. The gym was mostly empty by the time I finished my last set. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows, and the faint smell of sweat mixed with cleaning spray hung in the air. Daniel was still there, leaning against the row of dumbbells, stretching, relaxed but aware. My heart pounded the moment I realized I was alone with him, even though alone meant a room, not intimacy. But the proximity made my skin tingle, made my thoughts spiral. We exchanged a few words, simple, almost trivial. "Long day?" he asked. I replied, "Yeah, trying to get ahead." And yet, each syllable seemed heavier than it should have been, loaded with tension I couldn't name. I noticed the way his muscles shifted as he leaned, the subtle movement of his hands, the quiet confidence that made my chest tighten. My mind screamed, "Do not fall into this." And yet, I couldn't stop the fluttering hope that maybe he noticed me in the same way, that maybe he felt it too. Then it happened, accidental, or maybe inevitable. As I reached for a dumbbell he had just used, our hands brushed. The touch was fleeting, almost nothing to anyone watching. But to me, it was everything. I felt a spark, a jolt that shot through me, leaving my rational mind scrambling. I froze, words trapped in my throat. His hand didn't linger. He pulled back, casual, professional. But the brush of skin lingered in my mind, igniting a dangerous warmth I didn't dare explore. I had to leave. I walked to the locker room, each step heavy with the weight of what almost happened. Alone in the shower, the water streaming down, I felt the pull of desire and guilt coiling around each other, impossible to separate. I thought of my husband, of the quiet house waiting for me, and the distance I'd allowed to grow. And yet, I couldn't fully extinguish the memory of that touch. It was too electric, too intimate in a way that words couldn't capture. That night, I realized how fragile restraint could be, how close I had come without realizing it. And the terrifying part was that I didn't want to resist completely. I wanted to explore that line, see how far it could stretch. But I didn't. I stepped back. And yet, I knew I would carry that moment, that feeling, with me far longer than I ever intended. After that night, the tension didn't fade. It grew sharper, more insistent. Every gym session became a careful dance, a test of my own control. I couldn't avoid him. I didn't want to. Yet, each time I entered the room, my awareness tightened like a wire pulled taut. Every glance, every slight movement he made felt loaded, and I found myself reading signals where there were none, imagining meaning in casual gestures. One afternoon, I stayed late again, ostensibly to finish a routine. The gym was nearly empty, the hum of machines the only sound. Daniel was there, doing pull-ups near the wall I usually warmed up by. I positioned myself a few machines over, pretending to stretch, pretending to focus on my own workout, all while my mind catalogued his movements. The curve of his shoulders, the way his back flexed, the subtle tilt of his head as he counted reps. I noticed he glanced my way, and my stomach tightened. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the room. Nothing was said. Silence, and yet it felt loud, vibrating in my chest. My thoughts raced. He knows. He must know. He can feel this too. I told myself it was absurd, that he couldn't possibly feel what I was feeling. But the ache in my limbs, the heat rising in my skin, the way my pulse spiked with every passing second, it was undeniable. At one point, he came closer, adjusting weights on a nearby machine. Our proximity was minimal, but it was enough. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, subtle but magnetic. My hand brushed against the handle I was adjusting, and for an instant, I imagined letting it linger, imagining his hand covering mine, imagining what it might mean if I crossed that line. My chest constricted with the simultaneous terror and longing of the thought. I stepped back quickly, pretending to check my phone. My mind screamed that I had come too close, that I had allowed the fantasy to creep into reality, even briefly. But part of me also thrilled in it, in the near miss, in the dangerous exhilaration of feeling seen, desired, and alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I left that day with trembling hands, a hollow ache, and a secret I carried like a live wire inside me, something I couldn't share, yet couldn't forget. Even now, I replay it, analyzing every glance, every gesture, every fleeting brush of skin. The memory is sharp, intimate, and unyielding. And the most frightening part is that it wasn't him who almost broke the boundary. It was me, standing at the edge, testing how far I could go before retreating. The next time I saw him, I felt the weight of that memory pressing down on me. I had hoped distance would dull it, that rationality would reassert itself, but it hadn't. Instead, anticipation had sharpened. Every step into the gym was measured, every glance cautious, yet impossibly drawn to him. I knew that restraint wasn't just about avoiding action, it was about surviving the tension in my own mind. That evening, the gym was dimmer, the crowd thinner. Daniel was there, adjusting his gloves at the punching bag, his back to me. I approached my usual equipment, deliberately close enough to feel his presence without confronting it. I could feel the air between us, charged with something unspoken. I tried to focus on my routine, but every repetition was fractured by the awareness of him, by the possibility of a brush, a look, a misstep that would ignite what we both silently knew could exist. We spoke that day, brief, casual remarks about technique, about timing, about form. But the pauses stretched impossibly long, heavy with an invisible weight. Every word was laced with unacknowledged meaning, every silence an invitation I didn't want, but couldn't resist. My thoughts flickered between guilt and longing, between the image of my husband waiting at home and the magnetic pull of Daniel's presence. And then, a moment I'll never forget. As I reached for a water bottle, our hands met, brief, accidental, or maybe fate's cruel tease. The shock of contact shot through me, a spark that left me breathless. I felt the temptation clawing at my reason, whispering possibilities I knew I could not indulge. My body reacted before my mind could intervene, every nerve alight with a desire that both terrified and exhilarated me. I stepped back immediately, forcing a neutral expression, pretending to adjust my bag. He didn't comment, didn't linger, and yet the electricity between us remained palpable. Alone in the locker room afterward, the echo of that fleeting touch resonated through me, leaving my skin hot and my mind restless. I replayed it endlessly. How close I came, how easily a single decision could have unraveled everything. And yet, amid the guilt and shame, there was clarity. I hadn't crossed the line. I had felt the pull, yes, but I had chosen to step away. I realized then that desire and restraint can exist simultaneously, that near misses can define a person as much as actions, and that sometimes the most powerful moments are those that never happen, but linger, haunting you, shaping you, leaving you suspended on the edge of yourself. After that night, I started noticing myself in ways I hadn't before. Not just noticing him, but noticing me. How my body reacted, how my thoughts wandered, how every interaction with Daniel left a residue of longing that I couldn't shake. I became hyper-aware of my own loneliness, the emotional starvation I had buried under routine and silence. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what I had allowed myself to feel, and the fragility of that line I was walking. There was one afternoon when the gym was nearly empty, and I caught him stretching near the mat I was using. Our eyes met across the room, and I felt a flush creeping over my skin, not from exercise, but from proximity. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Just being there, visible and unaware of the storm he stirred inside me, was enough to send my mind spinning. I imagined conversations that didn't happen, touches that never occurred, and in those fantasies, the emotional intensity was unbearable. I realized then that what almost happened wasn't about Daniel's actions. It was about my own vulnerability. Every glance, every shared silence, every fleeting brush of hands had been magnified in my mind. I had created an entire world of tension and desire in which we both existed, even if he had no idea. And the terrifying part was how much I wanted to explore that world, how seductive restraint itself had become. Yet, with every pulse of desire, a voice inside me, reason, guilt, fear of consequences, pulled me back. I remembered my husband, my marriage, the life that would shatter if I gave in. I thought about the intimacy I craved at home but didn't have, and I realized I could acknowledge that longing without surrendering to it. That night, I drove home with my hands trembling, my chest heavy, carrying both the ache of unfulfilled desire and the clarity of my choices. Even now, weeks later, I replay those moments with Daniel in my mind. The memory is vivid, intimate, and relentless, a reminder of how close I came to losing myself and how my restraint defined me more than any action could. And though nothing happened, the near affair left me changed, alert to my own desires, painfully aware of my loneliness, and suspended in that dangerous space between temptation and control.